I never meant to come back to Ashgrove, but when your life falls apart in front of everyone you know on a stage, no less, you don't get to choose where you heal or hide. For me, it was back to this frozen corner of Colorado surrounded by silence and snowdrifts with nothing but the past waiting in every creak of the floorboards. The house I grew up in still smelled like old coffee and soldering iron. My dad's scent, a blend of obsession and isolation. He was a physicist, brilliant and strange. The kind of man who muttered equations instead of bedtime stories, who named our dog Schrodinger. He died last year. Heart attack, they said. Quiet alone, I hadn't opened his study since the funeral. Until that night, I had just come home from a grocery run, another glamorous shift at my part-time gig delivering organic hummus and oat milk to retirees. My fingers were numb, my back aching, and my soul felt permanently under gray skies. I poured myself a drink, turned on the old space heater, and stared at the sealed door across the hall. Something about that night, maybe it was the wind, or maybe just the silence, dared me to cross it, so I did. His study was exactly as I remembered, walls lined with dusty journals, stacks of unreadable math, and scribbled diagrams pinned like constellations across a corkboard. But what caught my eye wasn't any of that. It was a sleek metallic rectangle on his desk, a Tesla Cyberdrive blinking faint blue under the desk lamp. I picked it up. My name was etched on the bottom. Ethan, only when you're ready. My chest tightened. He hadn't spoken to me for 3 years before he died, and now this. A posthumous breadcrumb. Curiosity beat grief. I plugged it into my laptop and everything changed. The files were encrypted, not just password protected, layered in custom algorithms, and buried inside dummy folders with names like tax stuff and dog photos. But I used to be a neuroscience grad student at MIT. Well before I burned out and everything came crashing down. So I still knew how to code. And after 3 hours, 2 cups of coffee, and 1 breakdown, staring at an old family photo, I cracked it. Inside, there was a single folder titled Subconscious Entanglement Research, V491. It felt like a prank, but when I opened the first file of video, my father's face filled the screen. He looked tired, older than I remembered. If you're seeing this, Ethan, I'm probably dead. I didn't know how to explain what I found. I still don't. But if I'm right, this could change the way we understand consciousness forever. It's not just particles that are entangled, it's us. Our minds, our pain, our intentions, and maybe our souls. I stared at the screen, frozen. Was he serious? The next few files were wild. Graphs of brainwave frequencies, handwritten notes about emotional echo fields, a diagram mapping memories to neural vibration spectrums. There were mentions of something he called quantum resonant fields linked directly to the subconscious mind. I was halfway through a PDF when something caught my eye, a section titled The Dream Protocol. It was a mix of quantum mechanics and guided meditation. That's when I laughed out loud. My dad, the man who once told me emotions were just misfiring neurotransmitters, was writing about emotional energy and spirit matter resonance. Was he having a breakdown? Or was I? I should have closed the laptop. I should have walked away, but I couldn't. Because that night I dreamed of him. Not a memory, not a flashback. He was there, sitting on the porch, sipping coffee like he used to on winter mornings. Only, it wasn't coffee. He looked at me and said, "You're not broken, Ethan. You're just vibrating at the wrong frequency." And then I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of the Tesla drive spinning, even though my laptop was shut. The next morning, I tried to tell myself it was just a dream. Stress, grief, too much coffee. But when I checked my phone, the GPS app had glitched overnight. It had recorded a location ping right on my father's grave. At 3:17 a.m., I sat there on the edge of my bed, heart pounding. It felt like someone or something was trying to reach me, and I had no idea what it wanted. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. I'd think about an old memory like the time my dad built me a telescope for my 12th birthday, and that same night the telescope would fall from the attic shelf on its own. I'd hum an old jazz tune he used to play, and the radio would glitch, cutting to that exact song on an AM frequency. These weren't just coincidences. They felt entangled, like my thoughts were bleeding into reality. Like I had stepped into some hidden layer of the universe where meaning lived just beneath the static. I started digging deeper. Late nights, energy drinks, quantum physics, textbooks, old journals I never dared open before. One entry stood out: the mind doesn't end at the skull, It echoes, it broadcasts. Trauma carries a frequency. Love does too. That line hit me harder than I wanted to admit because I had spent so long feeling numb. It never occurred to me I might still be transmitting pain. Now, every time I close my eyes, I see flashes, equations dancing in smoke. My dad's voice distant and slow. If you change the pattern, you change the field. Something is waking up inside me. Something old. Something mine. Something I've never dared to look at before. And I think it's time I finally do. 3 days after I found the drive, I booked a one-way ticket to San Jose. It was a dumb move financially, but I needed answers. And there was only one person who might understand what I'd found, Avery. She was my ex, brilliant grounded, the kind of person who kept her coffee schedule in a color-coded spreadsheet. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since I fell apart and ghosted everyone, including her, but the moment she picked up my call and heard my voice, she said 4 words. I didn't expect. You found his work. Her lab was in Palo Alto, part of a fintech-funded startup incubator that moonlighted as a think tank for fringe science. The building looked like a coffee shop mated with a server farm, neon accents, glass walls, baristas in lab coats. Avery met me in the lobby. She hadn't changed, still wore those thick frame glasses and a North Face jacket 2 sizes too big. She didn't hug me, just crossed her arms and said, "Show me the files." We spent the next few hours locked in a conference room, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she decrypted data packets and cross-referenced neural models. She barely looked at me. Her mind was elsewhere, immersed in the math. Then she froze. Wait, this isn't just quantum theory. These are neurological overlays, brainwave imprints. She pulled up a diagram, a swirling lattice of waveform spikes mapped against emotional triggers. Ethan, these are emotional frequencies. I blinked. Like vibes, no. Like quantifiable, repeatable responses. Look, your father recorded EEG and heart wave data during intense emotional recall, then match them to quantum fluctuations in nearby entangled systems. So what he was trying to prove, emotions affect physics. No, he was trying to prove emotions are physics. It sounded insane, but then again, my life hadn't felt normal in a long time. Avery set up a basic EEG headset, patched it into a feedback loop, and asked me to think about my worst childhood memory. I didn't need long. I closed my eyes and went back to that night. Me, 10 years old, locked out of the house in a snowstorm because I'd spilled water on one of Dad's notebooks. I stood outside in the cold for almost an hour, shivering, trying not to cry. As I remembered it, the EEG spiked. Then the lights flickered. Avery's jaw clenched. That wasn't a surge from the equipment. That was external. She ran the test again this time, with neutral thoughts. Nothing happened. Then she asked me to recall the night I found the Tesla drive. The moment I watched the video and heard my dad say, "You're probably dead," the temperature in the room dropped. I could feel it, like the memory had weight. And the more I leaned into it, the more the screen started glitching. Just subtle flickers, as if the data was reacting. Avery sat back slowly. Okay, that's not possible. We spent hours testing everything. Different emotions, randomized memories, even song lyrics tied to specific years of my life. The results were inconsistent, but when they hit light distortions, sudden shifts in battery drain, Wi-Fi interruptions localized to our devices. It was like some invisible field was resonating in sync with my thoughts. Later that night, as we sat in her office, Avery pulled up a file labeled QER04B, Entangled Consciousness Theory. It was my father's. The document outlined a model where human consciousness, once entangled with an external quantum field, could imprint frequencies beyond time and space like a pebble dropped into a still lake. But here's the kicker. He believed the subconscious mind was the true transmitter. Not our words, not our actions, but the silent beliefs underneath. Avery leaned back and rubbed her temples. This could change everything. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, or it could break because if your subconscious is constantly broadcasting, what happens when the signal is corrupted? What happens when you've spent your whole life radiating trauma? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay on our couch, headphones in, playing one of my dad's audio files from the cyber drive. It wasn't a lecture or a formula. It was a story. Imagine you're standing in 2 places at once, his voice said. One version of you remembers pain, The other remembers love. Whichever one you feed becomes the real you. It sounded like one of those weird bedtime stories he used to tell when mom was out of town. But it stuck with me because I could feel something shifting inside me, like there were two versions of Ethan beginning to split, one still broken and one waking up. By morning, Avery had begun building a model. She called it a QFI loop, quantum feedback interface. If we can find a way to stabilize your frequency, we might be able to control how it interacts with the field. I laughed like tuning a radio. Exactly right now you're static, but if we can get a clean signal, then what? She hesitated. Then you might be able to rewrite the feedback, change the pattern, influence what the field reflects back. I felt dizzy. It was too much, too fast. But deep down, it made a twisted kind of sense. After all, my life had felt like a pattern repeating itself for years. Same failures, same fears, same self-sabotage. What if I'd been vibrating the same broken frequency all along? By the time I left her lab that evening, the sun had dipped behind the hills. I stood in the parking lot looking up at the sky. Everything felt charged. Like I was a wire waiting for current, Avery called out from behind me. Ethan, if we keep going down this path, there's no turning back. I nodded. I think I passed that point the night the drive turned itself on, and then I got in the car and drove, but not home. I drove towards something I couldn't name, something already inside me, waiting to be remembered. I've never been the kind of person who meditates. I always thought it was for people with too much time or too little going on inside their heads. But after everything Avery and I uncovered after watching my own thoughts distort electricity and glitch screens, I figured maybe silence was worth a shot. The audio file I chose was labeled Protocol 9. I sat on the floor in her guest room, back, straight, palms open, trying not to feel ridiculous, and then I hit play. At first, it was just my father's voice, measured calm, not like the man I remembered, breathe and hold. Let it go. Slow your frequency. Imagine light not above you, not around you, inside you. Now follow the sound. And then the static started. A low hum, like an old radio trying to tune itself, and then everything went black. I don't mean I passed out. I mean, I left, I don't know how else to explain it. One second I was sitting on a rug in California. The next I was standing barefoot in a space that felt like memory and electricity. At the same time, the sky above me rippled like heat waves. The ground was white like polished marble, but pulsing faintly with veins of blue light, and then I heard him. Ethan, I turned. He was there. Not my father as he was before he died, but younger, maybe 40, wearing that old corduroy jacket and brown loafers he wore when I was a kid. But his eyes, they weren't human. They shimmered like reflections, like he was made of data pretending to be flesh. This is not a dream, he said as if reading my thoughts. You're inside the resonance. Welcome to the field. I tried to speak, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. He walked closer. You opened the channel. You activated the protocol. That means you're ready. Ready for what? I finally croaked to stop lying to yourself. Then he pointed his hand outward, and the space around us shifted. Suddenly, we were in my childhood home, but fractured, like a 3D model with missing textures. The dining table flickered. The walls bent like smoke. Then I saw a version of myself, 9 years old, sitting at the table, tears on my cheeks, a failed science quiz in my hand, and my father yelling. I turned away. Why are you showing me this? Because this is the pattern, he said. This is the frequency you've been vibrating since you were a child. Shame, guilt, fear. These memories don't live in your head. They live in your subconscious. They power the signal you're broadcasting, and that signal is what's shaping your life. The memory shifted again. Now I was 17 fighting with him in the garage. He'd caught me applying to art school instead of Stanford. He broke a wrench across the table in anger. The echo of it made my ears ring even now. Every scar, he said, every secret you buried lives on. You want to unlock your hidden energy, then stop pretending you're fine, my voice cracked. You don't get to say that. You left me nothing but blueprints and silence. And yet here you are, he said softly, still seeking answers from a man you swore you'd never become. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. The space around me shifted again, this time into something darker. A hallway, no doors, just mirrors on both sides. Each one reflected a different version of me, some successful, some broken, some angry, some gone. These are your quantum selves, he whispered. Each one a frequency away, each one built by a different vibration of belief. You think your life is the only path. No, it's just the one you've been tuning into. I pressed my palms to my ears. This feels like one of your horror stories, I muttered. Only I don't know how it ends. He stepped closer. That's because you've never written your own ending. You've only reacted. That hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. All these years I hadn't been building. I'd been bouncing from one failure to another, from one fear to the next, telling myself it was just how life worked. Like some cosmic script I didn't get to edit. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't written at all. Maybe I'd just been vibrating on autopilot. If I changed the signal, I whispered, "Can I change the path?" He didn't answer. Just looked at me with those unreadable, pixelated eyes. Then the space began to fade. Light fractured, sound reversed, and I felt myself falling backward through sound, through time, through something deeper. I woke up on the floor, gasping. The room was still dark. The audio file had stopped, but the air felt charged like lightning had licked the walls. My hands were shaking. Avery rushed in from the kitchen. "Are you okay?" You screamed. I nodded slowly. I saw him. "Your dad." "No, me, all of me." She sat beside me, handing me a glass of water. "I warned you," she said gently. "The deeper you go, the more unstable it gets. This isn't just data. It's resonance. You're syncing with something not meant to be contained." I looked at her, finally saying it out loud. "He's still alive in there." She didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she already knew. Maybe deep down she felt it too, that I hadn't just accessed old memories, I had activated a transmission. And my father, or whatever was left of him, was still broadcasting. I stopped sleeping, not because I couldn't, because I was afraid of what I'd see if I closed my eyes again. The last time I entered that resonance field, if that's even what it was, I came back feeling like a passenger in my own body. My hands trembled, my voice cracked over words I wasn't even speaking. And worst of all, I kept hearing him, my father, not outside me but inside, whispering during quiet moments, finishing thoughts before I had them. Avery noticed, she always does. One morning over burnt toast in silence, she slid a hard drive across the table. "You said you wanted out of the loop, so this is everything you need to delete the construct, to shut down the last remaining echo of your dad's code. You built a kill switch," she nodded. Eyes low. "Call it a psychological firewall. Upload the script and the system will collapse in on itself." I stared at the drive. It felt too easy, like pulling a plug on a ghost. But that's the thing about ghosts. They don't live in code. They live in memory. I uploaded the file anyway. Sat in the dark, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen, 30%, 60, 80. Then the lights flickered. My breath caught. The cursor froze, and then just before it hit 100%, a blue screen followed by one word, "Y." My pulse spiked. I rebooted the system. Nothing. Everything was locked, encrypted again. The drive refused to eject. Avery rushed in, phone in hand. "The signal's not local, what?" I ran a trace. "There's a frequency ping coming from outside, maybe even offshore from where." She hesitated. "It bounced through a blockchain node based in Iceland." I laughed because of course it did. Crypto ghosts, that's where we are now. She didn't laugh. "Ethan, this isn't funny, I know." "Then why are you smiling?" "Because he's not letting go." That night, I couldn't sit still. The walls felt too loud, the air too thick. I opened my journal, the one I'd been scribbling in since Ashgrove, and flipped back through the pages. All the diagrams, the dreams, the memories. There was a pattern, like a loop with no exit. Just before midnight, I pulled the QFI headset over my ears and lay down on the lab cot. This time, no guided meditation, no audio file, just me and the dark. I fell fast, no visuals, no sounds, just sensation. And then I was standing in the snow, back in Ashgrove, but not as I am now, as I was 10 years old, locked out of the house, shivering, hugging myself while the lights inside stayed warm and golden. This was the memory, the one I avoided at all costs, the one I let shape everything without even knowing it. And he was there, watching older now, silent just like that night. I turned to him, angry, confused, exhausted. "Why? Why did you leave me out here? You spilled water on my work," he replied. His voice was flat, mechanical. "You were careless. You had to learn." I shook my head. I was a kid, and I was a man with expectations. "You were a father," I shouted. The snow whipped harder. You weren't supposed to make me afraid to come home. Silence. Just wind and shame. He stepped forward, put a hand on my shoulder, but it didn't feel like a hand. It felt like memory, like weight. Do you still hate me? I wanted to say yes, but the word wouldn't come, because beneath the anger was something else. Sadness, grief, longing. I took a breath, the kind of breath that shakes your whole spine. No, I whispered. I don't hate you. I just never knew how to let go of what you did. His face softened. Lines of light cracked down his cheek like breaking porcelain. Then let go now? I closed my eyes, reached for the version of me, still curled up in the snow, and hugged him hard. The world around me started to collapse, not violently, but gently, like pages closing at the end of a bedtime story. His voice came one last time to reprogram your subconscious. You don't have to fight the ghosts, you just have to forgive the echoes. I woke up crying, not sobbing, not breaking, just breathing with tears in my eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt hollow. In a good way, like something had finally cleared out. Avery was in the next room. She didn't ask what happened, just handed me tea and said, "Your frequency is different." I nodded, because I'm not broadcasting pain anymore. And what are you broadcasting now? I thought about it, smiled possibility. Later that day, we ran the field test again. Same parameters, same equipment. But this time, nothing glitched. No temperature drop, no flickering lights, just a steady signal. Clean, stable, aligned. Avery ran the data 3 times. This doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. I told her I'm not reacting anymore. I'm creating. That night, I journaled something simple. 4 words: I am not him. And I meant it, because whatever part of him still lingers in the code, it's not in control anymore. He didn't vanish. He became part of me, the part I finally made peace with. When you stop vibrating from your pain, the world doesn't just feel different. It is different. That's what hit me first. Not the flash or fireworks, but the stillness. The sense that, for once, I wasn't bracing for something to fall apart. Avery and I kept working on the QFI prototype, but not for the tech bros or the venture capital crowd in Silicon Valley. We built it for us, for people like me who spent years broadcasting shame and failure and didn't even realize they had a choice. We started small. A podcast, just a microphone, some old software, and a title that made us laugh. The Quiet Frequency. We didn't think anyone would listen. We weren't experts. We weren't polished, but we were real. Our first episode was just me telling the story, how I thought I was broken, how I found the Tesla drive, how I met the version of my dad that only existed in code and guilt, and how I forgave him. We ended the show with a simple line: what you feel is what you're creating. Within a week, we had 10,000 downloads. Then came the emails from people in Montana, New York, even Norway, telling us that something we said made them cry or think or sit in silence for the first time in years. We weren't preaching, we were just sharing. The kind of things you don't hear in textbooks or TED Talks, more like spiritual Reddit stories, but without the drama. Just everyday awakenings. By episode 5, a reporter from a wellness magazine in Beverly Hills called us the most grounded minds in quantum spirituality, which felt like a stretch. But then again, maybe it wasn't, because we weren't selling anything. We weren't trying to be gurus. We were just telling the truth about pain, about patterns, about how to manifest reality from the inside out. The funny thing is, once I stopped chasing success, it started chasing me. Invites started trickling in, conferences, guest interviews. And then one day I opened an email with the Stanford logo in the header. They were hosting a symposium on consciousness and emerging tech. They wanted me to speak. The night before the event, I stood in the mirror rehearsing. Avery watched from the bed, laptop glowing in her lap. "You nervous?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, why?" "Because I'm not a scientist anymore," she smiled. "No, you're something more dangerous." "What's that?" "Someone who speaks the truth and actually lived it." Stanford was surreal. The lecture hall was packed. Students, professors, CEOs from tech firms. I stood under the lights and looked out at them all, so eager to hear something cutting edge. And I gave them this. We talk about quantum entanglement like it's some distant phenomenon, like particles dancing light years apart. But the real entanglement isn't out there, it's in here. I tap my chest between who we think we are and who we've always been. You don't need to hack the universe. You just need to remember You were never separate from it. Silence, then applause, not thunderous, not performative, just real. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving something. I felt like I was just being. Avery met me outside after the talk. It was raining lightly. She pulled her hoodie up and kissed me on the cheek. You crushed it. Was I too soft? No, she said, you were finally you. We went home that night and recorded another episode. This one was different. Less story, more stillness. We talked about breath, memory, faith. I even read a passage from one of my dad's old notebooks. It reminded me of those Bible stories people used to read at church, not in content, but in tone. Simple, sacred human. The field doesn't respond to who you pretend to be, I said. It responds to who you really are when no one's watching. Months passed, the podcast grew. Opportunities came, but we stayed grounded. Avery still ran the tech side, I still journaled every morning. And we made a vow to each other. No matter how big this got, we'd never sell the truth, only share it, because that's what changed everything for me. Not the drive, not the tech, but the choice to feel something different and let that frequency lead the way. I still hear my dad sometimes, not like before. Not in fear, now it's just a whisper. A quiet resonance that reminds me, this is what becoming feels like. And it is messy, honest, beautiful, alive.